Dear students, welcome to the first segment on To Autumn, which is the last of Keats's odes. We have already done the Grishanan ode with you, and there I had told you that Keats was born in 1795 and passed away in 1821, a very short life, as you can see. This particular ode called To Autumn was in fact the last of Keats's odes. It was composed on 19 September 1819. We have the exact date as different from the other odes, whereas I have told you we don't have definite date. Keats clubs them together to say that they were composed in May 1819, and this is clearly 19 September 1819 because we have a letter supporting that, and it was published in 1820, just a year before his death. Of course, it's the final, as I told you, the final among the 1819 odes. It was composed after a walk near Winchester, and it's quite a significant one because the ode marks an end to his poetic career. In about a little more than 1 year, Keats would die in Rome out of tuberculosis. By this time, he has decided to embark on some other career because of economic constraints. There were George and Georgiana kids who had migrated to America, and they wanted money desperately. They had helped Keats in the time of his financial needs. Now Keats is unable to help them. The death of Tom Keats had been a kind of a recurrent grief for him. And then there is his own failing health, his continuous suspicion that one day he will show symptoms of tuberculosis, which ultimately really happens. And in this particular ode, all these things come in a major way, but as a kind of a background rather, not in any way deciding the mood or the temperament expressed in the ode. Let's tell you a little bit about the composition. In a letter to Reynolds, as I've told you, that it can be very well dated, the poem, because it's supported by a letter. He writes, "How beautiful the season is now," and I quote, "This may be important for your answers when you are preparing for it. How beautiful the season is now, dash, how fine the air, full stop, a temperate sharpness about it. How beautiful the season is now, dash, how fine the air." It's a quotation from his letter to Reynolds. A temperate sharpness about it. And then he writes, "I never liked stubble plains so much as now." Stubble plains are fields with remains of the crop, small remains of the crop after harvesting it. So, and we'll find references to stubble plains later in the poem also. Keats writes, "I never liked stubble plains so much as now." This was a letter written on the 19th September 1819, and which was immediately after writing this poem. So we know in this letter he talks about writing this poem. Now let's come to the central themes of Ode to Autumn. Ode to Autumn explores, like the other odes, it explores the themes of temporality, mutability, and morality. But there is an exception. In comparison to the other two very well-known odes, and one of them we have already done, Ode to Autumn or Ode to Autumn does not provide imagination and art as means of escape from the world of actuality. In the Nightingale Ode, it is asserted that one needs to return to the world of actuality, but still imagination is given the power to afford a temporary escape from it. In the Grecian ode, that escape can be to some extent afforded by art. Of course, Keats there again problematizes the issue. But over here there is nothing as such which can really afford an escape, which can really bring to the poet an escape route from mortality. Rather, the poem talks about a kind of a negotiation, a kind of a reconciliation with the fact of mortality. It's basically a poem of celebration of autumn as a season and the peace it brings. There's a peacefulness in autumn, a sense of fullness as well. And the three stanzas of the poem consists of 3 11-line stanzas, and the 3 stanzas of the poem actually correspond to 3 phases of the autumn season, and they also explore the 3 aspects of the season. For instance, the first stanza deals with the early autumn and the late summer. We can see that nature is in its complete ripeness, and we are deceived to some extent. There are images of deception in the first stanza. We are deceived to some extent into believing that this fullness will never go away, that this ripeness is all. It is fully permanent. So the first stanza brings out the ideas of fullness, ripeness, plenitude, energy, and vitality, a kind of a matured vitality that is associated with the season of autumn. The second stanza depicts mid-autumn. And while in the first stanza, autumn is seen as a provider of fresh kernel, which is just mature enough to consume, the second stanza shows it slowly approaching towards the end. It's a time of harvest. There's a kind of an end implicit in the idea of harvest. It's a time of a patient waiting, time of reaping, and it's characterized by a kind of a quietness, a kind of a cooling off. The harvester is careful and waiting patiently for the slow departure of the season. The third stanza, which is the last one, represents the late autumn with all its coldness and the approach of winter. But what is also remarkable in this is the fact that Keats is also bringing about a kind of a reconciliation with the fact that autumn is going to end and winter is going to come. It's a kind of an understanding, it's a kind of a realization that temporality, mutability, and mortality are unavoidable in life. And in this peaceful calmness, in this calmness of realization, in this calmness that comes when contemplating the natural cycle, comes a state of equanimity, a state of quietude, which is reflected in this stanza. So, Autumn Ode is a poem written by a person facing death. Till now he is not very sure about it, but he can at least, have ideas about it, or, he knew tuberculosis very well from close quarters. He lost his very close people in tuberculosis. So it's told that the first time he coughed up blood, he could recognize that it was tuberculotic blood. So here's a person who is coming to terms with the fact of mortality, though too prematurely, and though the difference between the natural cycle and human life, as you know, occurs in the fact that natural cycle is cyclical. After autumn, winter will come, but still after winter, someday spring will again come. But in human life, this doesn't happen, particularly from the Christian point of view. It is linear and not cyclical. But still, there is a kind of a peacefulness, a kind of calm that has descended upon it. And the language and the imagery of the third stanza clearly brings out this peacefulness. Now, Keats here will come to the structure at the end of our understanding of the text line by line, but let's pick up one point over here. Keats here employs the structural feature of a odal hymn, a hymn written in a form of a ode. As we have seen, it's a kind of a celebration. A hymn is also a celebration of prayer, a celebration which is almost most of the times associated with religion. And over here we see that the tripartite division reminds us of the three parts of the odal hymn. The first part being called the strophe, the second part antistrophe, and the third part the epode. Now we'll read stanza 1. I don't think I'll have time to get into the line by line analysis of stanza 1 right now in this slot. In the next slot I will obviously do this. Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit and vines that round the thatch did run. So I'm reading this poem, actually I know the text is in front of you, but you need to understand how to read it. So if you can, you read it with me. To bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and feel all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clannish sails. This is the first stanza, and as I've told you, the first stanza is full of images and other features which bring about the atmosphere of calm, a kind of a homeliness, a kind of a peace. All these are, if you come technically, the use of the M sounds over here at the beginning, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. Mellow fruitfulness is a kind of a ripeness in which the thing becomes soft. So you can understand the implication is that it's very close to decay. Of course, when it is ripe, it's edible and we don't feel like that, but you keep it for a few days and it will decay. So the implication over here, under the lines, between the lines rather, is that it's going to decay. close bosom friend of the maturing sun. Sun has not fully matured at this phase, and the season is being called the close bosom friend, very close friend of the sun, because at this time it is most often very sunny, which is very appreciated in the West, particularly in the northern hemisphere, as you can understand, particularly in places like England, where the weather is not very sunny every day. Conspiring with him how to load and bless, and it is as if conspiring with the sun. It has entered into a secret agreement with the sun how to load and bless. We have found two ing words, better to say, continuous, two words in continuous tense, maturing and conspiring. All this somehow suggest that it's an ongoing process. There's also another ing word over here later, budding. We'll come to that later at the end of our line by line reading of the first stanza. But maturing, conspiring and budding, all these three somehow suggest the slow maturation, that this maturation, that this journey towards the end is a slow process. That is where we have to end today, because we have come to, it's more than 16 minutes have passed, and if it's a larger file it will be difficult for me to upload and you to download. In the next session we'll be dealing with this stanza in detail. Thank you.